Joseph Vissarionovich Stalin was born to a poor family in Gori, now Georgia, in the Russian Empire. He ruled the Soviet Union from 1927 until 1953, serving as both General Secretary of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union 1922, 1952, and Chairman of the Council of Ministers of the Soviet Union 1941 to 1953. He began governing the country through collective leadership, but by the 1930s, he had become the Soviet Union's de facto dictator. Stalin's government was responsible for the deaths of millions due to engineered famines, ethnic cleansing, and executions. He also supported mass repression and deportation. However, there are things we can learn from these Stalin quotes, things that remind us where dangerous thoughts lead. He joined the Marxist Russian Social Democratic Labor Party and became an editor for the party's newspaper in his youth. Through a series of robberies, kidnappings, and racketeering schemes, he raised funds for Vladimir Lenin's Bolshevik faction. This resulted in multiple arrests and several exiles. It isn't surprising that when he became the country's leader, he ruled using a blend of ideologies from Marxism and Leninism. There are also some Stalin quotes that impart a little wisdom and wit. Artillery is the god of war, Joseph Stalin. In war, I would deal with the devil and his grandmother, Joseph Stalin. Death is the solution to all problems. No man, no problem. In the Soviet army, it takes more courage to retreat than advance. The death of one man is a tragedy. The death of millions is a statistic. If the opposition disarms, well and good. If it refuses to disarm, we shall disarm it ourselves. Remember how the First World War broke out. It broke out as a result of the desire to redivide the world. I know that after my death, a pile of rubbish will be heaped on my grave, but the wind of history will sooner or later sweep it away without mercy. The Red Army and Navy and the whole Soviet people must fight for every inch of Soviet soil, fight to the last drop of blood for our towns and villages. Onward to victory. World War II was fought for the abolition of racial exclusiveness, equality of nations and the integrity of their territories, liberation of enslaved nations and restoration of their sovereign rights, the right of every nation to arrange its affairs as it wishes, economic aid to nations that have suffered and assistance to them in attaining their material welfare, restoration of democratic liberties and destruction of the Hitlerite regime. History shows that there are no invincible armies. A sincere diplomat is like dry water or wooden iron. Gaiety is the most outstanding feature of the Soviet Union. Print is the sharpest and the strongest weapon of our party. Everyone imposes his own system as far as his army can reach. The leaders come and go, but the people remain. Only the people are immortal. Nobody respects a country with a poor army, but everybody respects a country with a good army. I raise my toast to the Finnish army. Ah, these diplomats. What chatterboxes. There's only one way to shut them up, cut them down with machine guns. Bulganin, go and get me one. It is enough that the people know there was an election. The people who cast the votes decide nothing. The people who count the votes decide everything. There's only one way to shut them up, cut them down with machine guns. Bulganin, go and get me one. It is enough that the people know there was an election. The people who cast the votes decide nothing. The people who count the votes decide everything. Joseph Stalin quotes are chilling. Stalin, real name Joseph Vissarionovich Jugashvili, was the infamous dictator of the Soviet Socialist Republic and the Soviet Union, and the General Secretary of Russia's Communist Party. He changed his name to Stalin later in life. Stalin, meaning man of steel in Russian history, states that with the millions of deaths under his ruling, he is known as one of the most ruthless mass murderers. Stalin was born into poverty in a Georgian peasant village and suffered from physicalities, a scarred face from smallpox and a deformed arm from a carriage accident which made him stand out and get treated cruelly by kids. He felt inferior, and with that, begun striving for greatness, respect, and revenge on those who crossed him. As a young man, he got into a lot of trouble. Although his mother wanted him to become a priest, he joined a secret organization that supported Georgian independence from Russia and the writings and sayings of Karl Marx and Vladimir Lenin. In 1901, Stalin joined the Social Democratic Labor Party and put effort into the Russian Revolution, getting arrested and exiled, calling meetings, and organizing operations and strikes. When the secret police marked him as an outlaw, he went into hiding and continued his work. His idea of work was robbing, kidnapping, and extorting to raise money. In 1922, Stalin was appointed to the position as General Secretary of the Communist Party, and his followers began addressing him as Comrade Stalin. When Lenin died in 1924, Joseph Stalin got power over everyone, even those who were supposed to have control over him. There are accusations that rivals were aligning with capitalist countries, and with this came the Great Purge, a political campaign that eliminated members of the Communist Party. At least 750,000 people were executed during this time, and more than 1 million people were sent to forced labor camps. During the late 1920s, Stalin took away land from millions of peasants who died from forced labor and starvation. He set in motion industrialization, and anyone who resisted orders was exiled to labor camps or immediate. Stalin's Soviet army was unprepared when Hitler and his Nazi party struck Russia in 1939, even after they had signed a pact. The Soviet Union entered the war, negotiating with British Prime Minister Winston Churchill and U.S. President Franklin D. Roosevelt, with hopes to defeat the German army. Unfortunately, Churchill and Roosevelt were replaced, and both America and Britain were suspicious of Stalin and his desire to develop communism and the power of Soviet Russia throughout Europe. Western powers then interfered and formed NATO at the time of the Cold War. Stalin's health plummeted in the early 50s, and he quickly died, leaving a legacy of death, horror, and tragedy. As Russia's infamous dictator leading in genocide, he is considered history's most ruthless mass murderers. A single death is a tragedy. 1 million deaths is a statistic. Joseph Stalin ideas are far more powerful than guns. We don't let our people have guns. Why should we let them have ideas? The only real power comes out of a long rifle. Joseph Stalin. Everyone imposes his own system as far as his army can reach. Joseph Stalin. Education is a weapon whose effect depends on who holds it in his hands and at whom it is aimed. Joseph Stalin. History has shown there are no invincible armies. Joseph Stalin's death is the solution to all problems. No man, no problem. Joseph Stalin. In the Soviet Union, it takes more courage to retreat than advance. Joseph Stalin. The Red Army and Navy and the whole Soviet people must fight for every inch of Soviet soil, fight to the last drop of blood for our towns and villages. Onward to victory. Joseph Stalin.